Hello and welcome back to awtoolbox.com. My name's Glenn Keller, and in this video we are going to be diving further into workflows. In the previous video we started taking a look at the inbox, looked at some tasks that we had already sitting in the My Task and kind of explored those tasks, saw what attachments we could interact with, and then we had also investigated how to search for release status objects, to search and find icons that represent if an object is in process or has a specific status. We talked a little bit about the advanced search options that you have to be able to find objects, and then also dove into what happens either in a workflow or after the workflow has been submitted by being able to go to the workflow tab and reviewing a workflow report on what all has occurred. Now, if it's in multiple workflows, you can view them up here. You can just kind of switch between them, and we'll see examples of that as we go forward. We can also see upcoming tasks and the full diagram of the workflow here if it's been through a workflow at all. So we learned a lot about workflows in that first video, and what we're going to do in this one is take that a step forward. So we don't just interact with workflows. We also need to be able to submit workflows. And we are still going to be dealing with some out-of-the-box workflows in this one before we get to kind of a custom workflow that does a whole bunch of different things to help us understand what's going on. So in this case, what we're going to do is do a search for an object that's in the system. So this object has gotten to a point where we can get an approval for it. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to do an 090 star search in the AW Toolbox machine. Now, if you are looking for a component, you could create a new component or you could revise a component. Just make sure that you're not messing around with production data while you're doing the training. So in here, I'm going to come in, and this spindle high-speed component right here, this is the one that is ready to go through the workflow and get its status. So we've already created this object, and you can see that the geometry is in here. I can see that I have a JT file. If I go to attachments, I can see that all the files relative to it, the drawing, the CAD data, as well as the visualization data are here. If I come in, it is not currently a part of a change. And then another thing that I like to check on before I submit this into a workflow is if I come over, there is a checked out column here. It's also an attribute on the overview page. So you can see checked out is right down at the bottom here. So if this is checked out to somebody, it'll say who it is. And a lot of workflows aren't going to allow you to submit this to the workflow if it is checked out. So just come up to the very top here, and if it is your object, make sure you go into edit, and then you can check in the object using the edit. So this object isn't actually owned by me. This object is owned by somebody else, so I don't get the check in or check out option. In that case, I'd have to hit them up, send them a message and ask them if they're completed with it so I can get it submitted into the workflow. This could be a document, this could be a part like it is here, whatever be the case. So at this point, I know that this object is checked in. I have all of the attachments necessary, and I can go ahead and submit. Now, you can submit while you create an object as well, and some companies have that streamlined where it just automatically submits in, and then you use the tasks to attach new documents and things. So it is kind of up to how it plays around in your system, but in general, when you are submitting to a workflow, you would select the object or objects. You could do multiple, and then say submit to workflow, or you could add it to your change objects if you are working in a change. So basically we can make it an impacted object, or we can make it a reference object, solution, or something in the scope of the active change I have applied to my profile. I'm going to submit to the workflow in this case. And then with the submit to workflow overview here, we kind of talked about this in a previous video. But I can come in and I can say select assignments, and notice this one is blank. So assignments is driven by which workflow process that you have selected. So I'm going to come in assigned. Again, you may not have this radio button set up here at the top. If your administrators have turned it off, that means they have designed the workflows to only work in specific scenarios. So if that's the case, you'll either have a drop-down list or one template assigned in this template field right here. I'm going to go ahead and select all. That gives me access to all of the workflows. And then if I come in here, I can see there's change processes. These are all out of the box workflows. And you can see that some of them are like generate a part, generate a design. So some of them will use little processes called workflow handlers to actually do things, send notifications, or they'll release objects, or they'll check and see if a property is set. So all of those types of interactions can happen with these workflows. So if I come down a little bit further, you can see there's a TCM release process. So the TCM release process is probably the simplest example that we can go through. What this process does is it simply puts a status on this object. That's pretty much it. So if I hit TCM release process and select it, you'll notice that my target is this. But the actual targets, what you'll see when the workflow goes through, is that the child elements here will also get a status. And that's because the workflow includes them after I submit. So I don't necessarily have to add anything else here. In my case, I don't have to go to the children and pull it up, but that does depend on what your workflow does. I could also add references as we've talked before, but when I'm ready, I can just hit submit. So in this case, I've submitted to the workflow. You can see it was submitted. And if I scroll over to the left-hand side, you can see now this has a release status. I don't have anything in my inbox in this case because this workflow just immediately executes, adds the status to it, and the status basically adds additional permissions against the object so that it can't be modified after the fact. I can still go in and, depending on my permissions based on that status, I can still review everything, I can still pull it up, I can still view the 3D data out of the box, but again, all of this is subject to your environment. If I come down to participants, looking at the workflow itself, you'll notice there are no participants for the workflow. And then if I go to workflow, I've got just a start and a finish. And that's all that this workflow does. There's no interaction here. So in this case, I've already submitted and worked through this. So let's do one that's a little bit more cumbersome. So I'm going to come in here and select the second object. Again, I'm only using these as examples. These objects need to be released. So in this case, I'm going to submit this one, but this one I need to get an additional review for some reason or another. So I'm not going to submit it to the TCM release process. I'm going to submit it to the requirement review process, which is what we had went through in the previous video. This time, though, I'm going to take a deeper look at assignments and what it looks like if we are submitting to a resource pool. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say new. I could add, save as, or revise this. So I could create a revision of it and submit it, or I could save as this object and submit it. In this case, I'm just submitting the object, and we'll do with that in the future. I'm going to go ahead and submit to workflow. And then at this point, I'm going to go ahead and do my all and select the workflow. Again, you may only have yours. I'm going to come down, and the one that I'm going to grab is just the one that we had before, the requirement sign off. So this one just has a review task on it. That's pretty much all it's doing. And if I come into assignments now, in the previous go, it would have assigned me the task. So the task came to me right away. And then it asked me to pick somebody, and then I picked somebody and it went to them for the next step. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select that task assignment at submission. And that way it doesn't come to me immediately unless I want it to. So in here, I'm going to come in and I'm going to select. You can see it's got one unstaffed DBA. So I'm going to come down. It says one is required. I'm going to select that. And you'll notice on the right-hand side, it'll filter to only those users or resource pools that I can select. I'm going to go ahead and pick the DBAs in this case. And we're going to take a look at what it does for the DBAs. But I'm also going to go ahead and say assign an additional reviewer. And I've messed that up. So in this case, I've added one extra additional reviewer that is also DBA. So I'm going to select remove to remove that. And then I can see the reviewer. I've got that selected. So the reviewer here, you'll notice up at the top, it has a star on it, so it's required. If I hit DBA again, notice I need to click assign right at the top of this. So I'm going to click assign, and it assigned it to the reviewer. Now I'm going to come down to additional reviewers, and you can see that it's not even going to allow me to add an additional reviewer at the moment. So I'm just going to come over to the right-hand side, and I'm going to find the reviewer that I want. So in this case, I'm going to assign engineering, and I'm going to do the entire engineering resource pool. And I'm going to assign it here. So notice the assign button comes up after the fact. Now, if I wanted to apply me as the assigner, I could do that as well, but in this case, I think I'm set. So you can see the table opens up, and now I can see the people that I have assigned to those. And I'm going to hit submit. Now again, this differs from the first time because in this case, I've assigned it to resource pools, not individuals. So in here, it's submitted to the workflow, and I can go into my workflow tab. And you can see that it has started, and then it completed the select team. So if I come in here, it has automatically completed that first task now. And it just goes to this task. So that makes the system a little bit quicker. You do your selections at the beginning. Some workflows take a very long time, and you can't guarantee people are going to still be in the office by that point. So doing a selection on a resource pool is actually a lot more beneficial because then the task always goes to a group of individuals, and whoever's available at the time can claim the task and then do the task. So in here, we've sped up the workflow, we knew who we had to select, and now we can take a look at those resource pools. So you can see there's a sign off here and a sign off here. So these two sign offs have went to the engineering designer resource pool as well as the DBA resource pool. At the moment, if I look at my profile, I'm currently in the engineering designer group and role. So if I go to the home, I should see that I have a new task, but you notice that I don't see it here. So these buttons, if I open this up, are not going to show me this tracking folder. So it's not updating that, but this is the workflow that I had submitted. So I can review it and I can see exactly where it's at looking at it from this view as well. Now if I go to my tasks, notice I have nothing assigned, and that's why my task doesn't have anything assigned, so I'm not going to see it in that tile on the front page. If I go to the team though, because I am in the engineering group and role, engineering designer group and role, I can select the task in here, and then I could actually perform the task and do what I need to do. So I could do it right here. Now be very careful with this. A lot of the times, and it's known to be best practice, is executing this task from this location may not be the way that you need to do it to get the right permissions. The other benefit to doing the next process, which is called claiming a task, is that if you're looking at this and so is somebody else in your group, you could both be trying to execute the task, which may take several hours to do. And then somebody's going to click approve right before the other person. So what we recommend is instead of signing off in the team inbox, we recommend having the permissions to come in and actually claim that task. So if I come in here to the manage key, I can come in and claim the task. Note, I could also abort the task. So since this is my workflow and I accidentally submitted it, I could do an abort and cancel the workflow. And that abort process will still be recorded in the workflow history. I could also pause the workflow. Those two are fairly self-explanatory, but the claim workflow task for this assignment, if I say click it, it's going to take that task out of that resource pool. So anybody that had it open or anything aren't going to see that task anymore. It's going to get ripped out of their inboxes, and then it's going to get moved and reassigned to me. So if I go to my tasks now, you can see the task is now in my inbox. And if I go to the home, you can see now the inbox tile is updated. So don't just look at the inbox tile as kind of the note there. It only updates once it's in your task, and administrators may assign you to the team for that reason, to claim tasks from an inbox. So in here, now I can select the task, and now we are at the approve or reject state. If I reject this is kind of the first task in the workflow. I don't know really what it's going to do there, but let's go ahead and try that. So I'm going to say reject. And notice it went away. So if I come back into team, notice it's gone. And if I go into tracking, notice it's here. So that didn't cancel out the workflow. It just essentially sent it back. And then notice I have to come in here and hit undo decision if I want to kind of get it back. But if I look at workflow, it rejected at this location and it hasn't went anywhere. So this workflow is not really designed to go anywhere. I would just need to open it up from my tracking folder and say undo decision. Now, if I go back into team, notice it has remembered that this is owned by me. So now it's back in my task, and if I select it, I can go ahead and approve it. So now the workflow is done and my tracking is done. So if I look at this, you can see it's still kind of hanging around here. So I'm going to hit workflow. And in this case, I didn't set the quorum when I submitted it. So you'll notice it's awaiting a decision from the DBA. So the DBA group and role also has this task sitting in theirs. And because I haven't defined it as only one person needs to fill out this workflow, now the workflow is sitting and waiting. So if you see that, just note to come to the workflow tab and see who else needs to sign off on this still. Now, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and abort the workflow. We know that if the DBAs get it, they have to go to team and then claim the task, access it from their My Tasks, and then they'll be able to work with it. But let's go ahead and abort the workflow to show kind of what that looks like. So if you have the abort permissions in the workflow, all you have to do is come into Manage and say abort. Now, an abort is recorded, so you can say accidentally submitted to the wrong workflow. So if you did that, then that absolutely makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and click abort. It is going to, if I go find that object now, so let's go back a couple. Let's go back to the object that we had searched for a little bit earlier. So that was 090. And the object in question was this one. So in here, you can see that aborted is recorded on that object. And you can see it was approved at one point and completed at one point. The arrows and the colors will reflect the approval or what paths it had went down. Red would be bad. And then you can see the entirety of the workflow was aborted. And the workflow step that actually executed the abort is here. So everything gets recorded. Essentially, we now know how to claim tasks that are assigned to other locations, like a resource pool. You do see all the tasks from all the groups and roles that you are logged in as in Active Workspace. It's not going to separate it based on what group and role you have active. So we hope you've enjoyed this overview of submitting and kind of understanding how you assign different groups and roles or people to the workflow and how that's represented in the system. In the next video, we're going to go a little bit deeper with this into that bigger workflow we keep talking about. And we're going to traverse backwards paths, approvals, statuses, multiple tasks, just kind of a bigger example. And then we'll cap that all off with maybe talking about assignment lists. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next one.